It was the kind of town that didn't appear on most maps, tucked between folds of rolling hills, its roads stitched by old rail lines and shaded by ancient oaks. Grentham, Pennsylvania, looked like something lifted from a daguerreotype, time-worn, quiet, almost too perfect. Caleb Morrow first laid eyes on it from the back of a rickety bus, arriving with a suitcase, a notebook, and a half-formed intention to escape his own shadow. The bus driver had been gruff, said little, and left him at the corner of Main and Willow with a nod. No station, no signs, just a hand-painted wooden plaque nailed to a post, Grentham Est 1824. As the bus groaned away into the fog, Caleb noticed something strange. It was mid-afternoon, yet lanterns were being strung across the street. White ribbons flapped in the breeze. Women bustled with baskets of flowers, and a brass quartet tuned instruments on the church lawn. A wedding, perhaps. Odd for a Thursday, but that was just the beginning. Before we dive deeper into this chilling mystery, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true tales lost in time. Haunting, hidden, and unforgettable. He followed the scent of lilacs and the sound of bells toward the church, a stately stone structure with ivy crawling up its facade. People moved with quiet purpose, smiling, nodding, humming tunes under their breath. Children scattered flower petals down the sidewalk. Yet something was missing. He saw no groom, no bride, no signs of a family gathering, no anxious laughter, no photographers or ushers guiding guests. Inside the church, pews were neatly lined. Candles flickered in their holders. At the front, a floral arch stood majestically under the light streaming through stained glass. Beneath it, a simple sign on parchment read, "Rejoice in Love." A woman in a dark blue dress passed by, nodding warmly at him. "Lovely day for it," she said. "For what exactly?" Caleb asked. She blinked. "The wedding, of course." "Who's getting married?" She gave a light laugh. "Why, the town is. We celebrate love. Isn't that enough?" He watched her walk away, bouquet in hand, her tone sincere. The organ began to play. Caleb stayed for the ceremony, seated near the back. A reverend with silver hair and a booming voice stepped up and gave a sermon on unity, joy, and shared history. The language was poetic, almost hypnotic, yet never once did he name a couple. No one exchanged vows, there were no rings, no kiss, no names. Afterward, the townspeople applauded gently, like at a play. They moved on to a modest reception outside the church, punch, lemon cakes, a violinist. He wandered among them, seeking answers. "Do you know the couple?" he asked an older man by the fountain. "They'll always be part of us," the man replied, eyes glazed with reverence. "Who exactly?" "The married ones, all of them." "All of them?" Caleb's journalist instinct, long dormant since the war, flickered awake. He smiled politely and stepped away, scanning the crowd. Dozens of people mingled. No tears of joy, no frantic bridesmaids, just pleasantness, practiced and clean. That night he found lodging at the Grentham Inn, a red brick house converted into a guest home. The proprietor, Mrs. Rowley, greeted him warmly. "So you came for the wedding?" she asked. "Yes," he lied, "but no one got married." Her expression faltered just a second before returning to its usual cheer. "It's tradition, a celebration of the heart. We do it every month." "Every month?" he echoed. She nodded. "Since long before I was born." Alone in his room, Caleb opened his notebook and wrote just one line. They celebrated a wedding today. But no one was married. He lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly. Something was wrong in Grentham. He could feel it in his bones, an itch beneath the skin, a silence too curated. Tomorrow he'd start asking questions. Caleb rose early, his sleep fractured by dreams of music with no melody and rooms full of strangers who smiled without blinking. The morning mist curled through the streets of Grentham like a living thing. He wandered aimlessly for a while, scribbling thoughts in the margins of yesterday's notes. Something about the town didn't settle right. Not just the empty wedding, but the way everyone spoke in half-phrases like they shared a secret he wasn't invited to. He made his way to the town square, where a small cafe served black coffee and buttered rolls. The woman behind the counter, Mavis, looked up as he entered. "You're the newcomer," she said, not unkindly. "Guilty," he replied. "Caleb Morrow." She didn't write it down. "Staying long?" "Depends," he said. "What's there to stay for?" Her eyes flickered. "Plenty of peace here. Quiet kind of life. That's what I'm looking for." It wasn't a lie. After the war ended, Caleb had tried to find stillness, drifting from city to town. Journalism had been a steady hand once, but reporting from trenches in France had changed him. When his paper closed his foreign desk, he took his pen and left, searching for something like silence. He'd never found it. But Grentham wasn't silent. It was hushed. There was a difference. He sipped his coffee and glanced around. The cafe was modest, with framed portraits of smiling couples lining the walls. Each photo bore a date, one per month, stretching back years. "Who are they?" he asked, gesturing. Mavis looked. Weddings passed. He stood to examine them more closely. Some photos were old, color fading, the corners curling. Yet oddly, many faces repeated. Same men, same women, just in different arrangements. "They all look familiar," Caleb said. "Small town," she offered. "You get to know everyone." He didn't push. Not yet. Later that day, Caleb walked the main roads. He met merchants, shopkeepers, a postman who barely spoke. Every introduction was polite, brief, and then redirected. "Are you staying long? What brings you here? You came for the wedding, didn't you?" It was as if the town couldn't imagine any other reason a stranger would visit. Near the edge of town, he found a library, not much more than a room filled with old volumes and news clippings. Inside, the librarian, a tall man named Everett, offered a nod. "I'm looking into Grentham's history," Caleb said casually. Everett pointed to a wooden cabinet. "Newspapers and town records are there, if they're not missing." "Missing?" "Some years weren't kept well, or got lost. Fires, misplacement. You know how it goes." Caleb pulled open the drawers. The papers were yellowed, their ink blurred. He flipped through marriage announcements. Many names, always the same ones, never any outsiders. "Do many people move here?" "Almost never," Everett said, pulling on his pipe. "People either stay or they leave quickly. And the ones who stay," Everett glanced at the door, "they find what they're looking for." He left the library with a folder of copied records and a head full of static. Back at the inn, he spread the pages on his bed. Dozens of weddings, all supposedly monthly, all uniting townsfolk. Not once had he seen mention of a bride or groom from outside Grentham. Stranger still, a name kept appearing. Josiah Finch, as the officiant, in records dating back over 2 decades. That would place the Reverend well into his 70s, if not older. Yet the man Caleb saw at the altar yesterday moved with youthful confidence, his voice commanding. Caleb underlined the name 3 times. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting the street in long amber streaks. Children played hopscotch near the chapel, chanting words that made no sense to him. He closed the window. In his journal he wrote, "Everyone smiles, everyone stays, everyone forgets. Except me." The next morning, Caleb returned to the church. It stood as it had the day before, immaculate, almost timeless. He wasn't sure what he expected to find, but something about the building nagged at him. It was too pristine, too untouched by the passage of time. The stone walls bore no cracks, the wooden doors no splinters, and even the grass surrounding it seemed carefully trimmed. Perfection often hid rot. The door creaked open without protest. Inside, the scent of lavender and beeswax lingered. Rows of pews sat silent under the arching ceiling. He stepped down the center aisle slowly, eyes scanning the stained glass windows depicting not saints, but anonymous figures embracing, dancing, celebrating. Not one bore a name. "You're early," came a voice behind him. He turned to find Reverend Josiah Finch in full clerical attire, polishing a brass candlestick. The man was tall, clean-shaven, his silver hair cropped neatly. His eyes, however, were what held Caleb. Sharp, calculating, ageless. "Forgive me, Reverend," Caleb said, composing himself. "I couldn't help but admire your chapel." "It's quite something. Grentham takes pride in this place," Finch replied. placing the candlestick back on the altar. "We built it with our hands and keep it with our hearts." Caleb nodded. "That wedding yesterday, was it for anyone in particular?" Finch smiled. "It was for everyone. No couple. No need," the Reverend said gently. "We hold ceremony to renew our bonds, to remember love in all its forms. Some communities attend funerals monthly. We choose joy instead." "And this has been going on how long?" Finch raised a brow. "Since Grentham's founding. Traditions matter, Mr. Morrow." "You know my name. You signed the guest book." Caleb felt the chill run down his spine. He hadn't seen a guest book. He cleared his throat. "So no one actually gets married?" Finch approached him, placing a hand lightly on the back of a pew. "Tell me, Mr. Morrow, does a wedding require a couple, or is it the spirit of union that counts, the promise of love, not the legal document?" "I suppose that depends on what you're celebrating." "Then you understand," Finch said, turning away. "Grentham celebrates what the world forgets, community, continuity, not individuals." Caleb studied him. The Reverend's hands bore no signs of age, no liver spots, no shaking. Yet the records claimed he'd been leading ceremonies since 1912. That would make him, what, 80 more? "Have you always been here?" Caleb asked. "Always," Finch said, without turning. "Some roots run deep." The answer was too smooth, too rehearsed. Caleb made his way to the back pews where pamphlets and prayer books were neatly arranged. One booklet caught his eye, worn, thin, with the title "Covenant of Joy" embossed in gold. He opened it. No scripture, just a collection of reflections, poems, and names. No dates. Some names were underlined, others were crossed out. He slipped the booklet into his coat. Finch didn't stop him. Outside, the sun had risen high, but the air was unnaturally still. As he stepped back onto Main Street, he passed by a notice board. Among the usual announcements, bake sales, choir practices, was a list of upcoming events. At the bottom, next wedding ceremony, April 14th, officiant, Reverend Josiah Finch. Couple, the dash was deliberate. Back at the inn, Caleb thumbed through the booklet. One name stood out, Helen Morrow, his grandmother. He froze. She'd disappeared before he was born, vanished from her Pennsylvania home in 1913. Her case had never been solved. He stared at the page, heart pounding as the name blurred. She had been here. Caleb spent the next day combing through town records with a new urgency. Helen Morrow. His grandmother. The name in that booklet wasn't coincidence. She had lived just 50 miles east of Grentham, a young schoolteacher engaged to a factory foreman in 1913, until one day she vanished without explanation. No note, no witness, just gone. He called it family lore, a cold case swallowed by the years. But seeing her name here, in this town where weddings didn't happen yet were constantly celebrated, opened a door he couldn't close. At the town clerk's office, he found a woman named Edna Parlow managing the files, dusty cabinets full of births, deaths, property transfers. She was meticulous, moving with a quiet efficiency that masked her years. "I'm researching some regional history," Caleb told her, "trying to trace movement patterns, migrations, that sort of thing." She adjusted her glasses. "Nothing much migrates here, Mr. Morrow." "I've noticed, but maybe names do." She blinked once, then gave a curt nod. "What do you need?" He fed her a name. Mary Elaine Tully, from 1912 or so. Edna shuffled through drawers, then frowned. "No record." "How about Helen Morrow?" Long pause. "No Helen Morrow ever registered residence here." "But the church records. We only maintain civic archives." "Would there be another place to look?" he asked, feigning neutrality. Edna hesitated, then said, "There's the old Tuller house up on Ridge Road. Agnes Tuller keeps family histories. She's a bit particular, but sharp as a blade." Caleb took the road north, winding past pastures and tall thickets until he reached a crooked house draped in ivy, its shutters half closed against the sun. He knocked. Silence. Then the door creaked open, just enough to reveal a sliver of a face, wrinkled, watching. "I'm not buying anything," the woman said. "I'm not selling," Caleb replied. I'm here about Helen Morrow. The eye narrowed. Come in, but don't touch anything. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of cedar and something older, dust and memories. Bookshelves bowed under the weight of generations. Agnes Tuller walked with a cane, but moved as if she'd known every floorboard's complaint. She was my cousin, Agnes said without preamble. Helen, we weren't close. She came here once, didn't leave. Caleb leaned forward. You're sure? I never forget a face, she said. They said she went back home, but I knew better. She smiled too wide when she arrived, like someone who'd been promised something sweet. What happened to her? Agnes looked out the window. You've seen the weddings? Yes. Then you've seen the lie. Caleb waited. They say it brings joy, Agnes murmured. But I remember the silences after. I remember the faces missing the next month. Always outsiders. Always pretty. Always full of hope. Then gone. And no one asked questions. We used to, when I was young. But then the questions stopped bringing answers, just disappearances. Caleb's pulse quickened. You think the town is hiding something? I know it, she said. And so do they. Why keep doing it? Agnes turned, eyes sharp. Because it works. The words hung between them like fog. Caleb swallowed. Do you have anything of Helen's? He asked. Agnes hobbled to a cabinet and withdrew a wooden box. Inside was a photograph, sepia-toned, slightly warped. A young woman stood at the chapel steps, smiling. Her eyes were his. On the back, in delicate script, April 1913, Grentham Parish. Next to it, a folded letter. The ink had faded, but one line remained legible. They said love is enough. But I think it's a cage. Caleb stood to leave. Be careful, Agnes said. This town only smiles with its teeth. After visiting Agnes, Caleb walked back to town with a weight in his chest that tightened with every step. The revelation didn't just complicate his investigation, it made it personal. Helen Morrow had walked these same streets, maybe entered the church with the same curiosity. Now she was a name in a booklet and a ghost in a photograph. He needed someone in town who didn't wear the same fixed smile, someone whose eyes didn't glaze over at the mention of tradition. That afternoon, he returned to the cafe. Mavis wasn't working. A younger woman with auburn hair stood behind the counter, her sleeves rolled up, arms dusted with flour. She was humming softly but stopped when he entered. You're Caleb, right? She asked. He nodded. And you are? Rachel Avery. I teach at the schoolhouse when the children show up anyway. You're not from Grentham, are you? She paused, then smiled faintly. Not originally. Caleb glanced around. Mind if I ask you something off the record? That depends. You writing something? Maybe, just trying to understand this place. Rachel leaned in, lowering her voice. Then you already know something's not right. He nodded. The weddings. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back. They're not weddings. Not really. What are they? She hesitated. They're rehearsals. For something the town doesn't want to name. Caleb's voice dropped. People disappear, don't they? Rachel didn't answer right away. Instead, she poured him a cup of coffee and passed it to him slowly. Not everyone sees it, or maybe they don't want to, but every few months someone new shows up, and then they're gone. No record, no bus ticket out. Just gone. He sipped the coffee. Why stay if you know that? Her expression hardened. Because I've been trying to find proof. My sister disappeared in 1926. Her name was Lydia. Came here for a summer teaching job. Never came home. The words hit like stone. Caleb sat in silence for a long moment. You think she was part of it? I don't think, Rachel whispered. I know. I've seen things. I've followed the rituals, the rehearsals. I even saw the chapel door close behind her. Caleb leaned in. Why haven't you left? Because the truth is in Grentham. And if I run, I lose the last piece of her I have left. A bell jingled at the door. Rachel straightened instantly, smile returning. Afternoon, Reverend, she called cheerfully. Caleb didn't turn. He didn't have to. Good day to you both, came the voice of Josiah Finch. The Reverend passed through slowly, acknowledging them with a slight nod. His presence filled the room like cold wind. Once he was gone, Rachel exhaled. "He knows who watches," she murmured, "and who doesn't." Caleb stared at the door. "He's been here since before my grandmother's time." Rachel looked startled. "Your grandmother?" "Helen Morrow. She came here in 1913. She never left." Rachel blinked. "Then it's not just the recent years." "It's been happening longer than I thought." They sat in silence, two threads in a tapestry they hadn't chosen to be part of. Outside, children played near the chapel, their voices rising in a chant. Caleb stepped out to listen. "Round and round the chapel stone, bride is gone and groom unknown. Lift the veil and find no face. Another heart has left this place." Rachel joined him. "They sing that all the time," she said. "No one teaches them, they just know it." Caleb felt something cold move through him. "How do we stop this?" Rachel looked at him, her eyes steady. "First, we survive." The next morning, Rachel slipped Caleb a folded scrap of paper. On it was a single name, Mary Elaine Daughtry. Alongside, an address, an abandoned farmhouse just beyond the East Ridge. "She kept a diary," Rachel whispered. "Her story is where mine started." Caleb left before sunrise, the path overgrown and silent. Dew soaked his boots. The house stood in ruins, windows shattered, vines snaking through its frame. Inside, dust hung in the air like fog. He stepped carefully over rotted boards and fallen beams, scanning for anything left behind. In the upstairs bedroom, beneath a cracked floorboard, he found it, a small leather-bound journal, its edges chewed by time, but the ink still legible. He opened to the first page. April 6th, 1912. "Mother says the wedding will be the finest Grentham's seen in years. I don't feel ready, but Reverend Finch says love is faith, not certainty. He speaks like he knows." Caleb flipped through. The entries began sweetly, talks of white dresses and lace, of lilac water and whispered vows. But by the third week, the tone changed. April 19th, 1912. "He won't tell me my groom's name. Keeps saying it's not about the man, but the moment. Everyone smiles too much. I feel watched even in my sleep." The pages turned darker. April 22nd, 1912. "I tried to run. Father caught me near the woods. He said I don't understand what this town needs. He cried when he said it, but he didn't let me go." Caleb's pulse quickened. April 25th, 1912. "The wedding is tomorrow. No fittings, no cake, just flowers and prayer. I saw Reverend Finch digging behind the chapel. When I asked, he said it was for the roots, but there are no trees." The final entry was short, scratched in trembling hand. "They said the town needs joy more than I need freedom. I think they mean to bury me in it." He closed the diary slowly, the air in the room pressing down like stone. She had vanished after that date. No record, no trace. Back in town, he met Rachel in the schoolhouse where she taught arithmetic to 6 quiet children who never spoke above a whisper. When the bell rang, she led him to the back room. "You found it?" He handed her the diary. She opened to the final entry and read it aloud. Then she closed her eyes. "She was only 17, Rachel whispered. "I read this years ago, but hearing it again, she was sacrificed," Rachel nodded. "They wrap it in flowers and music, but it's a ritual. One soul, once a cycle. The town stays safe, the people live long, nothing changes. That's the cost." Caleb's hands shook. "They said it was joy." "They lied." He looked around. "Why hasn't anyone stopped it?" "Because it works. Because no one outside believes. And because most who find out don't leave." Outside, a bell rang faintly in the distance. Rachel froze. "The rehearsal," she whispered. "They always hold one the week before." Caleb stood. "Then we have time." "For what?" "To prove it. To catch them." Rachel met his eyes. "Then we'll need to go deeper. Into the chapel. Into the records. And into the dark." Caleb felt something click in his chest. Not fear, but resolve. the kind he hadn't felt since the war. He looked down at the diary once more. I think they mean to bury me in it. He wouldn't let Mary Elaine be forgotten. That night, Caleb and Rachel pored over maps of Grentham's founding, old documents Rachel had found hidden beneath loose floorboards in the schoolhouse basement. Most were tattered, ink faded and fragile, but some dates were still visible. One record stood out, a land deed dated 1803, signed by a group identified only as the First Covenant. Among the names was Josiah Finch. Caleb stared at it, mouth dry. That would make him over 130 years old. Rachel nodded. I thought it was a namesake, a family tradition. But the handwriting, it matches. There's no way that man is human, Caleb whispered. Maybe not anymore. A silence settled over them. Do you know the town's founding story? She asked. Only fragments. Rachel leaned forward. They weren't pilgrims. They were survivors, from a burned-out colony west of here. There was a sickness, a famine, and then something they wouldn't name. They came here rebuilt and swore never to let the rot return. Caleb exhaled slowly. So they made a deal. She nodded. Something gave them peace, in exchange for obedience. He tapped the deed. And Finch was the messenger. Or the broker, she said. He keeps them in line, reminds them of the cost. That cost was people, outsiders, 1 per year. Wrapped in petals, cloaked in ceremony, dissolved into a myth the townsfolk whispered through prayers and children's rhymes. Later that evening, as Caleb walked alone past the chapel, he noticed the door slightly ajar. Curiosity, or something deeper, pulled him inside. The sanctuary was dim, lit only by moonlight filtering through stained glass. At the far end, beneath the arch where countless ceremonies had been held, sat Reverend Finch, alone, his back straight, his gaze unfixed. I didn't expect company tonight, the Reverend said calmly. Caleb remained by the door. I needed air. Grentham has fine air, clean, untouched. Finch turned to him, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. It preserves things. Caleb stepped forward. Like yourself, Finch chuckled. You're not the first to wonder, but questions often open doors best left closed. Caleb said nothing. Curiosity is a fine engine, Finch continued, but it's not a compass. You dig and you find bones. You write and people disappear. Then why not stop me? Caleb asked. Finch stood slowly, the motion fluid, unnatural. Because I don't need to. This town has survived by choosing joy. Ritual is simply the scaffolding. You think it's darkness, we see it as balance. Caleb stepped closer. And what happens when someone refuses? Finch's smile vanished. They do not. The words hung like ice. As Caleb turned to leave, Finch called out one last time. You should stay for the next celebration. It'll be meaningful. Back at the inn, Caleb found a cream-colored envelope slipped beneath his door. Inside was an invitation. Elegant script read, Grentham Parish Joy Ceremony, April 14th. Officiant, Reverend Josiah Finch, couple, Caleb Morrow and... The second name was blank. His hands trembled. They had chosen him. The next morning he showed the invitation to Rachel. Her face paled. They're accelerating it, she whispered. They usually wait, but now they know you're close. Then we're out of time. Rachel looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. There's still a way out, she said, but it won't be easy. Caleb didn't hesitate. Whatever it is, we do it. Together. She nodded. Then we start where all things hidden begin, beneath. The chapel's stone walls looked solid from outside, but Rachel had learned long ago that Grentham's truths never lived in plain sight. That night, under cover of rain, she led Caleb through the cemetery gate and around the back, where the foundation met the slope of the hill. There, she whispered, pointing to a patch of ivy. Together they cleared the vines and uncovered a narrow wooden hatch, warped and weathered. It opened with a groan that echoed like a cry. A narrow stair descended into darkness. The air turned cold immediately, damp, thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Caleb lit a lantern. The stone corridor wound down like a serpent's spine, walls tight, ceiling low. Rachel walked ahead with practiced care. "First time I found this, I was 15, she murmured. "Didn't make it far. The sound of my own footsteps scared me back. But now—" They reached a wooden door. It bore no handle, only a carved emblem, 2 wedding rings entwined around a single flame. Rachel pressed gently, and it opened inward. Beyond was a chamber that stole Caleb's breath. Dozens of mannequins lined the walls, dressed in aged wedding gowns and tuxedos. Faded lace, stiffened silk. Each ensemble bore a small yellowed tag, MED 1912, HM 1913, LA 1926, initials. Rachel moved to one and touched the fabric softly. "My sister's dress was pink," she whispered. She hated white. At the far end of the chamber, a table stood beneath a low-hanging light. On it, several locked trunks. Caleb forced one open with a rusted crowbar. Inside were personal effects, hair combs, photographs, rings, diaries. He picked up a locket and opened it. A woman's face stared back, younger version of someone familiar. "Agnes," Caleb murmured. Rachel turned to another trunk and gasped. Inside was a black-bound ledger. She opened it. Each page bore the name of a person. A date, a single word, given. The handwriting was Finch's. "It's a registry," Rachel said, "of sacrifices." Caleb scanned the pages. His own name was near the bottom, dated for the upcoming Sunday. Rage rose in his chest. "I'm not giving myself to anything." Rachel closed the book gently. "There's more." She moved to a wall behind the table, searching with her fingers. A hollow knock. She pressed, and a section of stone slid away, revealing a second, smaller passage. They crawled through it. The air turned metallic, bitter. The tunnel led into a natural cave beneath the chapel. Its floor was uneven, marked with candles burned to nubs and chalk circles. At its center stood a stone altar. Crimson stains marked the edges. The walls bore symbols, unfamiliar but deliberate. A circle of names carved into stone, repeating like a chant. Rachel backed away. "It's not a ritual of joy. It's a binding." "A covenant," Caleb said, voice tight. "They believe by offering a heart, the town stays whole. Disease stays away. Crops flourish. Time forgets them." "And the cost is one life," Caleb said, "wrapped in music and flowers." Rachel looked up. "No one ever comes down here." "No one who lives." Caleb stared at the altar, fists clenched. "Then it's time someone did." As they made their way back, Rachel whispered, "If we destroy that book, it breaks the order." "Are you sure?" "No," she said, "but I'd rather burn than be buried in lace." Back in the corridor, Caleb paused. "Rachel, this town doesn't take disobedience lightly." She looked at him, eyes steady. "Then we'll show them what it looks like." Back in Rachel's quarters above the schoolhouse, Caleb sat in silence as she locked the door behind them and pulled the curtains tight. The air smelled faintly of ink and old wood. On the desk lay the black ledger, still unopened since they left the chapel. He could feel its weight pressing against the room, heavier than its size allowed. "I need to tell you something," Rachel said. Caleb looked up. "I wasn't entirely honest with you," she began. "About why I came back." He said nothing, giving her space. "I didn't just follow Lydia's trail. I didn't just stumble into this place. I was born here." Caleb's breath caught. "I escaped when I was 10, she continued. "My mother, she was one of them. She believed in the covenant. My father didn't. When the town tried to offer me up, he ran. Took me as far as he could, but they caught him." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "I was raised under a different name. But after Lydia vanished, I came back. Not as Rachel Avery. As someone new, I needed to know if it was still happening, if the rituals were real." Caleb stood, stunned. "You knew this place?" "This whole time. I had to be sure," she said. "If I told anyone real, they'd say I was mad. So I waited, watched, until you came." His emotions tangled. Betrayal, understanding, fear. Why me? Because you asked questions. Because you found Mary Elaine. Because your name is in that book. He turned to the ledger, staring at the elegant ink. And what if I hadn't? Then you'd be standing under the arch next Sunday, alone, and no one would ever know. Silence stretched between them. I don't blame you, Caleb said finally. Rachel looked up. I'd have done the same, he continued, if I'd lived through what you did. A pause. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. Caleb stepped closer. Then let's make sure we don't. Their hands met, hesitantly, uncertain but warm. Real. They didn't speak of love. There was no time for it. But something passed between them in that silence, a bond not forged in longing, but in survival. Outside, the chapel bells began to toll. Rachel stiffened. It's the vow rehearsal. Caleb peered through the curtain. Townsfolk in muted colours moved toward the church, faces solemn, eyes cast downward. A procession, not of joy, but of submission. He grabbed the ledger. We burn this now, they'll know. Rachel nodded. We wait. Plan it right. When's the next open window? Saturday night. The Reverend prepares the chapel alone. I've seen him stay until dawn. If we get in then, destroy the altar and the book. The bond breaks, Caleb finished. We hope. That night they made their preparations, mapped escape routes, packed essentials, rationed matches and oil. As the lantern dimmed, Rachel sat on the floor, knees drawn close. Do you ever think, she murmured, that we're part of the ritual too? Not just sacrifices, symbols. Cogs? Caleb lay back on the floorboards. If we are, then I say we shatter the wheel. Outside, the wind picked up, the trees groaned. Sleep came in fragments. At dawn, Caleb woke to a knock at the door. A white envelope had been slid beneath the frame. He opened it slowly. Inside, a new invitation. Caleb Morrow and Rachel Avery. Let no bond be broken. They had been chosen together now. Rachel read the words. If we don't stop this, they'll bury us side by side. Caleb stared at the invitation. Then they'd better dig 2 empty graves. The days leading up to Saturday passed, with a stillness so thick it felt staged. No one spoke to Caleb or Rachel. The townspeople nodded politely but watched from corners, from windows. Even the children stopped chanting their rhymes. By Friday, Grentham moved as if beneath water, quiet, heavy, bracing for something no one wanted to name. The chapel bells rang twice a day, not 3. The innkeeper stopped serving supper. The cafe ran out of bread. Caleb and Rachel met in the old schoolhouse one last time before dusk. We'll enter through the back passage, she said. I've oiled the hinges. Caleb laid out the supplies, lamp oil, matches, the black ledger wrapped in cloth and a length of rope. What if Finch is already there? Then we finish what we can, Rachel said. We burn what binds them. The sky darkened early that night. As the town slipped into uneasy sleep, they crept toward the cemetery gate. No dogs barked, no owls stirred. Even the wind felt unnatural, like it held its breath. They reached the hatch, pried it open and descended. This time they didn't flinch at the corridor's damp air or the eerie stillness of the underground room. They moved swiftly, Rachel to the trunks, Caleb to the altar. Help me with the book, he whispered. Together they placed the ledger atop the stone. Rachel poured oil. Caleb struck the match. The moment the flame caught, the walls groaned. A low tremor rippled through the ground. They stepped back as smoke curled upward, dancing in strange patterns. The flames turned blue for an instant, then snapped gold. They backed toward the tunnel, but a voice echoed behind them. Do you understand what you've done? Finch stood at the passage's mouth, hands calm, eyes burning. Caleb didn't answer. The Reverend stepped into the chamber, untouched by smoke. Grentham survives because it remembers, because it obeys. You two, outsiders, born and returning, you think rebellion brings freedom? We think silence brings death, Rachel said. Finch laughed softly. Death is easy. What we offer is life, long life, peace, predictability. You've seen it, our health, our bounty, our stillness. Do you know what the world outside looks like now? Yes, Caleb said. It looks real. Finch advanced a step. There's still time. Take the next ceremony, join it. You'll never age here, never fade. Rachel stood firm. We're not here to live forever. We're here to end what should have died long ago. The fire roared higher. Behind them, the altar cracked. The names etched into the wall began to distort, curling, melting, slipping from memory. No, Finch muttered. No, no, no. He lunged forward, but Caleb swung the lantern hard. Glass shattered. Flames spilled. The chamber ignited. Rachel grabbed Caleb's arm. Go! They sprinted through the passage as smoke flooded behind them. The tunnel groaned. Stones fell. Somewhere in the dark, Finch's scream twisted into something inhuman. They emerged into the cemetery, gasping. Behind them, the chapel windows burst, spilling fire into the night. Alarms rang. Bells clanged wildly. Townsfolk ran from their homes in panic, some screaming, others falling to their knees. Rachel turned to Caleb. They know, he nodded, breath shallow. But it's too late for them to stop it. She gripped his hand, and they ran. Down Ridge Road, past Agnes Tuller's crooked house, into the woods that once held the silence of 100 secrets. Behind them, the chapel burned. Flames reached the sky. The veil had been torn. Smoke still curled over Grentham by sunrise. Ash rained gently across rooftops like grey snow. But the fire hadn't spread. The church stood blackened, its bell tower scorched, but the flames had stopped at its walls. It was as if the town had allowed the chapel to burn, no more, no less. Caleb and Rachel hid among the outer farms that morning, watching the town from a ridge. No one ventured near the ruins. Instead, they moved through the streets as if in mourning, their faces pale, their steps slow. Did we break it? Caleb asked. Rachel stared down at the chapel. We cracked something, but whether it shatters, we'll see. By evening, the air had changed. It was colder now, heavier, and silent in a way that wasn't peaceful. That night, Caleb returned to the inn for supplies they'd left behind. Rachel stayed hidden near the woods, keeping watch. As he stepped inside, Mrs. Rowley met him at the bottom of the stairs. She held a parcel in her arms. I was asked to give you this, she said, voice barely audible. He took it. By who? She hesitated. Someone who remembers, that's all. He opened the parcel outside. Inside was a folded suit, dark grey with a boutonniere, a wedding garment. Beneath it, a small envelope. His name was written in clean script, Caleb Morrow. Inside, another invitation. The ceremony was still scheduled, same date, same time. But this one included a name beside his, Rachel Avery. His blood chilled. He ran back through the trees, heart pounding. Rachel was crouched near the schoolhouse ruins, watching the flickering lanterns in town. They've doubled down, he said. They want both of us now, publicly. She didn't flinch. Then it's a performance. What? Rachel turned. We give them what they want. A ceremony, but on our terms. Caleb blinked. You want to go through with it? She nodded. If we don't, they'll find someone else. If we stand up there, eyes open, maybe we learn what they're really bound to. Maybe we tear the rest of it down from the inside. It's a risk. So is running. He looked at her, really looked. In her eyes was resolve, deeper than fear. All right, he said. Let's get married. Sunday morning came quickly. The townspeople gathered, as they always did, but this time in silence. The air was tense, expectant. The ruined chapel had been cleared. In its place, an open platform had been built, draped in white cloth and garlands, as though to hide the blackened earth beneath. Caleb stood in place, Rachel beside him, both dressed as the invitations had demanded. Around them, the townsfolk sat without speaking. Finch was gone. In his place stood Agnes Tuller. The old woman's hands trembled as she opened a worn book. Her voice cracked but carried, We gather here to honor unity, not by names, not by vows, but by balance. One given, so many spared. Rachel leaned toward Caleb. "It's the original rite." The air thickened. The sky dimmed slightly, though no clouds passed. Time seemed to pause. Agnes reached the final page. "Let no bond be broken." At that moment, Caleb took Rachel's hand. "We break the bond," he said clearly. "By will, not fear." Gasps echoed. A child cried. An old man shouted, "You don't know what you've done!" Rachel stepped forward. "We do." She pulled from her sleeve the last page of the ledger, their names scheduled for offering, and she lit it. The flame spread fast. The platform trembled. The crowd screamed. From beneath the platform a groan erupted, deep, ancient, furious. Rachel grabbed Caleb's hand. "This is what comes next," she whispered. The ground split beneath the platform with a noise like 100 voices crying out and vanishing at once. Flames shot through the cracks, not fire from oil or wood, but something older, blue at the core, black at the edges, pulsing like a heartbeat. Caleb and Rachel leapt back as the structure collapsed inward, pulling cloth and garlands into a swirling pit of ash. The crowd screamed, scattering, but their legs moved too slowly as if the very earth beneath Grentham refused to let go. From the hole rose a sound that was not a voice but still spoke. It sang, not with melody but memory. Caleb staggered, hands to his ears, and saw visions flashing through his mind. The faces of every girl taken, every smile practiced, every vow never spoken. He saw Helen, Mary Elaine, Lydia. He saw Rachel as a child running through fields before shadows swallowed her path. And then he saw Finch. The Reverend stood at the edge of the pit, untouched, eyes burning like twin lanterns. His skin had cracked like old bark, revealing light beneath. "You were warned," he said, voice echoing both in sound and soul. "No more," Rachel said, stepping forward. Finch extended a hand. "You've unbalanced the promise. There will be no harvest, no peace, no mercy." "Good," Caleb shouted. "Then let what's real come through." The pit widened. Columns of flame curled around the chapel's charred remains. The townspeople fell to their knees, wailing. And from within the pit, something moved. It wasn't a creature, not one of flesh or form, but a presence. Ancient, hungry, bound too long. Its shape shifted like smoke behind stained glass, always there, never seen. Rachel grabbed Caleb's arm. "We end it. Now." She pulled the last page of the original covenant, the one she'd hidden in her shoe. It bore the founding signatures, the seal of the first covenant, and at the bottom, one final clause written in red. "If broken by the willing, the bond shall turn upon its keeper." She held it aloft. Finch froze. Caleb reached into his coat and lit the page with the match he'd saved since the first night. As it burned, Finch screamed, not in pain, but in fear. The ground shook violently. Trees bent backward. The pit surged with light. And then, silence. The fire vanished. The pit sealed with a sound like a breath being drawn and never exhaled. Finch collapsed. His form flickered, one moment flesh, the next shadow. Then he was gone. The townspeople remained on the ground, stunned. Some sobbed, others stared into nothing. Rachel knelt beside one woman, touched her hand. "It's over." The woman looked at her, truly looked as if waking from a dream. "I remember my sister. She vanished. But now, she was real." She was real. Caleb helped another man to his feet. "Your town will have to remember now, not just repeat." A distant wind stirred, cool and dry. The bells didn't ring. The chapel didn't burn again. And from the fields came no music, only the sound of grass moving freely, without ritual, without rhythm. They walked together, Rachel and Caleb, toward the woods, toward whatever lay beyond the edge of Grentham. Behind them no one followed, but as they passed the last house, a little girl stood barefoot on the porch. She held a wilted bouquet in her hands. "Will there still be weddings?" she asked softly. Rachel knelt. "Yes," she said, "but only the kind that matter." The girl smiled, then ran inside. Caleb took Rachel's hand. "It's done." She nodded. "Let's go." and together they stepped beyond the place that had held too many names for too long. The sun hadn't yet risen fully when they reached the tree line, but already Caleb could feel something lifting from his chest. The forest was real again, no longer the silent barrier that guarded Grentham, but alive, wind moving through branches, soil damp and rich beneath their steps. Rachel walked beside him, steady but pale. Her hand still held the ash-smudged corner of the Covenant's final page, now burnt nearly to nothing. "We should head to Wiltshire," Caleb said. "They have a rail station. I can file a report." She nodded faintly. "If they listen." "They will," he said with more hope than certainty. They reached the ridge overlooking the valley just as the sky blushed with dawn. From there they could see Grentham, a town seemingly unchanged. No smoke, no flame, just rooftops and fields and narrow roads, like nothing had happened. But they knew better. Rachel sank to the ground, exhaustion finally overtaking her. Caleb sat beside her. Then he heard it. A single bell. He turned slowly toward the sound. It came from the church. "Impossible," he whispered. He stood. Below, in the very center of the town, stood Reverend Josiah Finch, or what was left of him. His suit was scorched, torn. His face, still eerily unlined, bore cracks now, glowing faintly with orange beneath. His eyes were vacant, but his posture unchanged. He lifted a book. Not the ledger. Something older, bound in skin, spine wrapped in iron. Rachel stood. "He wasn't the anchor," she said. "He was the vessel." Caleb's heart pounded. "Then what's the anchor?" Finch began to speak, but no sound came. His mouth moved, forming words that twisted in the air like smoke, then sank into the soil. The ground trembled again. "No," Rachel said. "It can't start again." "Not after—" "It never ended," Caleb said. "We only paused it." He scanned the town square. At the very center, where the platform had fallen, a circle of blackened earth now pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. "That's it," he said. "That's the origin. We destroy that, we end everything." They ran, down the ridge, across the meadow, into the streets of Grentham, now strangely empty. No one stopped them. Finch didn't move as they passed him. When they reached the blackened circle, Caleb dropped to his knees and began digging with his hands. The soil was soft, almost wet. Rachel helped, scraping at the layers until their fingers struck stone. A tablet lay beneath, round, carved with hundreds of names spiraling inward toward a single word in a language neither recognized. Caleb stood. "We have nothing left to burn." Rachel pulled the silver pendant from her neck. "My sister's." She placed it in the center. The tablet hissed, then cracked. A blinding light erupted upward. Finch screamed, and from the surrounding homes came cries, not of pain but of release. All across town glass shattered, doors flung open, candles blew out on their own. The name at the tablet's center turned to dust. Finch collapsed, no longer burning, just a man, just old and empty. The ground stilled. Rachel fell to her knees. Caleb caught her. "It's over," he whispered. She looked up at him. "I can feel her," she said. "Lydia, like she's finally gone. At peace." They sat there for a long time, surrounded by silence that no longer felt oppressive, but honest. A single breeze stirred the trees, and with it something left Grentham, something unseen, something that had been fed too long, gone now, and in its place, only the sound of wind and earth. They didn't speak much as they walked through the outskirts of Grentham that morning. The town stood eerily still. No bells, no footsteps, no rehearsed greetings. Windows remained shuttered, doors ajar. The spell, if that's what it had been, had cracked, and no one seemed to know what to do without it. Caleb and Rachel followed the ridge trail southward toward the edge of the valley, past the Tuller house, now silent, past the cafe where the sign hung crooked, and no one stood behind the counter, past the chapel, its door now hanging open, its altar reduced to cinders. By late afternoon they reached the forest line. "We should keep moving," Caleb said. "There's a farmhouse beyond the stream. I saw it on the way in." Rachel stopped, turned back one last time. "What happens to them now?" she asked. "They remember," he said. "For the first time." He took her hand. They crossed into the woods. 2 days later, they arrived in Wiltshire, covered in ash and dust, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. The town bustled with the normal rhythm of life. Honking cars, distant barking, radios playing too loud from open windows. It felt almost unreal. Caleb went straight to the local paper. At first the editor laughed. "A haunted town, secret weddings? Come on, son. I have names, records." "A witness," Caleb said, "and a church that no longer exists." The editor paused. "You're serious?" "I'm writing it all," Caleb said. "Everything. From the beginning." The editor leaned back. "You'll get laughed out of every room." "Maybe," Caleb said, "but maybe someone will believe me." He filed the story 2 weeks later. A full feature, photographs, interviews with Rachel. The ledger, now little more than a charred remnant, still bore Caleb's name on the last legible page. They published it under the title, "The Parish That Married Without Brides." No one believed it. Not really. Some called it a ghost story. Others said it was a metaphor for post-war trauma. A few religious groups tried to link it to prophecy. The town of Grentham was listed in the article, but when reporters visited weeks later, they found nothing. No chapel, no cemetery, just an empty field where the town had been. No footprints, no ruins, just grass, untouched, and one wooden sign, half buried in the earth. "Let joy remain." Rachel stayed with Caleb in Wiltshire for a time. They found a rhythm, small, quiet, real. But sometimes at night, Caleb would sit by the window watching the trees. "Do you think it's really gone?" she asked once. "I don't know," he said, "but it let us go." One afternoon, months later, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a photo, black and white. It showed the old Grentham chapel. In the corner, standing beneath the arch, were 2 figures, Caleb and Rachel. But it wasn't the day of the ritual. It was dated 1912. Caleb stared at it for a long time. Rachel touched his shoulder. "Do you want to burn it?" He shook his head. "No, we keep it. Let it remind us." He tucked the photo into the journal he now carried with him always, a leather-bound notebook. The first page bore just one sentence. "We chose truth over joy." Rachel smiled. "Then let's keep choosing." They packed that night. Together they left Wiltshire behind. And as they walked through the dusk, hand in hand, Caleb glanced once more at the horizon and whispered, not in fear, but in memory, "Grentham." Then he let the name fall behind him, silent as snow. 3 years later, Caleb received a letter postmarked from a town that didn't exist on any map. No stamp. No signature, just an ivory envelope with embossed gold lettering. Inside, an invitation. "You are cordially invited to the Grentham Parish Joy Ceremony in celebration of all that has been and all that must remain." There was no date, no names, just the emblem of 2 rings entwined around a flame. He stared at it for a long time before tossing it into the fireplace. The flames curled the edges, then consumed it completely. He didn't tell Rachel. She was in the garden that day, laughing with their daughter, Lydia, named not in mourning, but in light. Their life had moved forward. They had moved forward. But some things always linger at the edge of memory. Sometimes late at night, Caleb would hear a bell in the distance, faint, far too distant to be real. Or see a white ribbon tangled in a tree, or catch the scent of lilacs in the wind, even in the dead of winter. And he would wonder, not with fear, but with a quiet knowing, if Grentham had truly vanished, or simply slipped back beneath the veil, waiting for belief to open the door again. He never went back, neither did Rachel. But they kept the journal, they kept the photos, they kept the names. And every year on the same date, they walked into the forest behind their home and placed a single flower beneath the oldest tree. For the ones who hadn't been given the choice, for the ones whose stories were never told, for the ones who were offered instead of chosen. And in that silence they made a different kind of promise, to remember, to speak, to stay free. If this haunting tale moved you, We invite you to subscribe to the channel for more stories buried in shadow and history. Because sometimes, what's forgotten isn't gone. It's just waiting to be found. And if you're ready to uncover your next mystery, click the video suggested on your screen now. The next secret might be closer than you think. Until then, keep the light on.